Hello, everybody. Great. I see attendees flowing in for this conversation. We are so delighted to have you here for Florida Humanities webinar. This webinar is called Funding Opportunities to Complement Smithsonian's Waterways Exhibit. So if you are here to learn about how you can apply for funding opportunities with Florida Humanities focused on the environment, water, environmental humanities, you are in the right place. So what we are going to do today is I'm going to give you an overview of Florida Humanities, who we are, and then go through the exhibit to tell you a little bit about it. If you had not heard of it before, not to worry, we will cover that. And then I'll go into the two funding opportunities that we will have available in 2021 and in 2022 to fund some of your projects if you are so interested. So how this is going to go is I'm going to go through the presentation slide by slide. I'll do the talking. I'm going to eventually turn off my camera so you can hear me, but you won't be able to see me until I open my camera back up for our question and answer session at the very end. This webinar will last no longer than 1 hour, but it could last around 45 minutes, just to make you aware of that. And if you have questions as we are going through, what you'll do is you'll drop them into either of two places. One is the question and answer section, and the second is the chat. And for both of those, you can enable it so that all attendees can see your question. And that's good so that you know what's already going to be asked and what I will be answering when I get to the question and answer section, so that not more than one question is answered at a time. And maybe you'll have a follow-up question to that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen and get going with the presentation. So again, my name is Lindsey Morrison, and I am the Grants Director here at Florida Humanities. So today we are going to cover a little bit about who we are as Florida Humanities. If you have not heard of us before, I'll briefly go over that. I'm going to define the humanities because that's something that a lot of people are curious about, just a little Humanities 101. So I'll spend just a couple minutes on that and then move right into environmental humanities and how that is a subset of the humanities in a recently new field. Then I'm going to bring in my colleague, Patricia Putman, who leads up our Smithsonian Museum on Main Street program here at Florida Humanities. And this year we have our Waterways exhibit that's going to be touring the state. And then I'm going to come back and talk to you about the funding opportunities that we have and end it with the question and answer section. So who is Florida Humanities? Getting right into it. Florida Humanities is the nonprofit affiliate for the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we are Florida's statewide affiliate. So every state has a humanities council. Alaska has one, Hawaii has one, Michigan has one, and we are Florida's. And our mission is to preserve, promote, and share the history, literature, cultural, and personal stories that offer Floridians a better understanding of themselves, their communities, and their state. So what we do is we fund nonprofit and cultural organizations' humanities projects with funding that we get from National Endowment for the Humanities. You can think of us in a way like a community foundation, but our charge is to focus on Florida history, heritage, and culture, and to really showcase the diverse fabric that is Floridians. So what is the humanities exactly? I know it can be a little bit of a nebulous topic because the fields it covers are so broad. They range from history, literature, poetry, culture, languages, philosophy, sociology, art history. You can see it's a lot here. I won't read them all for you. But what people think about when they think about the humanities is they think about people like Aristotle or Plato, folks that existed a long time ago that maybe don't have a particular relevance for today. And that could not be farther from the truth, because the humanities is really the process of pursuing an understanding of our shared human experience. And that is currently very, very relevant, because through the humanities, we can learn how to think creatively and critically, to reason and to ask questions. really one of the fabulous roles of the humanities is to be a convener of people with lots of different perspectives, ideas, ideologies, and backgrounds, and to bring them together to foster constructive dialogue so that you can learn about someone else's perspective, but it also gives you a bigger insight into your own perspectives, who you are, how you got to where you are. A typical quality of a successful humanities programming, I like to say, is that a proverbial light bulb above your head, that aha moment that I did not think about that before. That makes so much sense now, considering the background, the cultural experiences lived by that person. That is really the role of the humanities, and I think we would all agree it is very, very needed today. So let's talk about environmental humanities, because this is what we're going to be focusing on for this webinar. And how does it relate to the humanities fields that I just described? So in definition, the environmental humanities is a rapidly growing field that probably emerged about 5 to 8 years ago. And it's the study of human perception, behaviors, and the relationship of humans to their surrounding environments, both social and natural. So think about how humans relate to our natural environment, the environment around us. And as we know in Florida, that is so important, particularly the water. We are a water surrounded state, but there's also water within us. You know, the Everglades, the swamps, the rivers, the springs. Humanity's relationship to their natural environment in Florida has existed for centuries. So described another way, this is what Arizona State University described environmental humanities as, and that it encourages us to understand human environmental systems, cultivate broader perspectives, envision bright futures, and participate imaginatively in shifting the narrative of who we are, where we are going, and how we will get there. So as you can see, the definition I gave for the humanities and how the humanities are relevant can be transposed into the environmental humanities. You still get that element of that human connection to the environment and that shifting perspectives about who we are and how we got here. So one important distinction between environmental humanities and environmental science, and this is very important before we transition into talking about our funding opportunities, because Florida Humanities funds environmental humanities projects and not environmental science projects. So I hope to relay this so that you can focus your projects that maybe have an environmental science spin on it, but the focus of your funding application will be on the more humanities, that discourse, that engagement in thinking about human relationship with the environment. So as you can see here, environmental humanities is the study of humanity's cultural, social, etc. relationship with the environment, versus environmental science, which is the study of environment and the solution to environmental problems. So you can see the different fields here, right? You're looking over in the humanities and you see that encompasses philosophy, literature, religion, art, anthropology, archaeology, and studying the environment and humanity's relationship to it can be prevalent in all of those disciplines, versus environmental science, which has less of a focus on our relationship as humans to our natural world and more focus on biology, plant science, zoology, oceanography, more of the hard sciences. Well, of course, we agree, you know, as an educational environmentalist, I so support these, but as an organization, what we are interested in funding is that more humanities focused project. So now what we're going to do is talk about an exhibit that we have partnered with the Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street program to bring this national exhibit to Florida and tour it around to 7 different sites across the state. We are so excited to offer this opportunity. As you on the call may have been aware, we've brought in previous exhibits on hometown teams. Voices and Votes was our exhibit that we brought from the Smithsonian in 2020. And the exhibit we are bringing in now, bringing in that environmental humanities theme, is waterways. So I'm going to ask my colleague, Patricia Putman, to unmute herself if she can, and take it over from here and give you a little overview of the exhibit.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's a really great introduction. I really appreciate that. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the Museum on Main Street program and the Waterways exhibit, and I will put into the chat some links over to the Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street website, where you can actually read a lot more information and detail about the various components of the Waterways exhibit. But Waterways, as Lindsey mentioned, is part of the Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street program, and that's designed to bring traveling exhibitions and public programs to small towns all across the country. These exhibits are really focused on local history, education, and community redevelopment. And it is a partnership with the Smithsonian that many of the state councils have entered into for several years now. So we're really excited to be the Smithsonian's affiliate in Florida for the Museum on Main Street program. Museum on Main Street does date back to 1994, and more than 1,600 communities all across America have hosted a Museum on Main Street exhibit. And as Lindsey mentioned, they really explore very broad themes or topics from a national perspective. And they've ranged from everything from immigration and foodways to sports in America, as well as the most recent exhibit that she touched on, Voices and Votes, Democracy in America, which we were able to host last year. Unfortunately, due to COVID, not many folks actually got to see the exhibit in 4 venues across the state, but there were some really terrific virtual public programs that our host sites and host communities were able to offer to complement the exhibit. So most of these exhibits are scaled down versions of much larger exhibits that are on display at various Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C., or fairly large exhibitions that the Smithsonian has designed to tour nationally. So they take these large exhibitions and really put them at a scale that's appropriate for small town America. So they fit into about 2,000 square feet, and they have a variety of archival photos, reproductions of historical artifacts, and even some interactive features, including tablets and questions on video screens to make the exhibits interactive for audiences of all ages, from school children up through adults. And again, the intention of the Museum on Main Street program is really to serve small and or underserved communities. And we often hear that this is an opportunity for people to engage with and visit the Smithsonian without leaving their hometown. They don't have an opportunity perhaps to travel to Washington, D.C., but they can visit the Smithsonian right in their own town when Museum on Main Street comes. So as Lindsey mentioned, Waterways obviously explores the water cycle, from its effect on landscape, settlement, and migration to its impact on culture and spirituality. We've got a number of interactive stations in the Waterways exhibit, and it really provides visitors a chance to explore water from both scientific and cultural perspectives, as well as encouraging rich conversations about water's impact on our daily lives. So if Lindsey, you could go to the next screen slide there. So as we mentioned, Florida Humanities has been the Smithsonian's Museum on Main Street partner since 2012. And since then, we've hosted 57 exhibits in 33 counties all over the state. Collectively, we've served over 200,000 people, but this Waterways tour is unique in that it's our largest exhibition tour that we've ever done. As you can see on the screen there, we have 7 communities all across the state that have already been selected to host the Museum on Main Street exhibit. We're getting ready to open the exhibit in Inverness at the Citrus County Historical Society later in June. It's a little over a month away. From there, we'll move on to Chattahoochee in Gadsden County at the Apalachicola Arsenal Museum. And then from there, we move through Port St. Lucie, Palm Beach County with the Dollyhan Cultural Center in Belglade, the Barron Library in Hendry County, the Amelia Island Museum of History in Fernandina Beach up in Nassau County. And then we'll finish all the way next September with the African American Cultural Society in Palm Coast and Flagler County. So each of these host sites and those partners have already received a $5,000 grant from Florida Humanities to host the exhibit, as well as to create some of their own complementary public programs and resources at those venues. So today I'm really excited that Lindsey has put together this opportunity to talk with each of you about funding ideas that you all have to help support the exhibit in a community with the exhibit coming close to you. So we've got a few different grant funding opportunities to help us extend the reach of Museum on Main Street in these areas or in communities nearby throughout the tour of the exhibit. So I guess, Lindsey, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can get right to the details about all of the funding opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you, Patricia. That was a really good overview. And if everyone viewing this webinar is busy writing down these sites, not to worry. If you're attending this live, I will be sending an email around with all of the information that Patricia is dropping in the chat, as well as some other information that may help you in crafting projects that relate to environmental humanities. And if you are attending this as a recorded session, that will be available on our website as well. So why we are talking to you about these tour sites is that we are highly encouraging cultural organizations, nonprofits, libraries, museums, historical societies, you name it, to apply for funding with Florida Humanities that go along with the theme of waterways. Because the reason is that this tour is going to be generating a lot of media attention and a lot of excitement across the state, and your additional projects will help complement it, and we can also showcase the projects that you are doing as well. So if you already had an idea, a nugget in your mind about something that you had wish listed or something that maybe you already intend to do in mid to late 2021 through 2022, this could be a great opportunity to request funding for us to not only receive funding, but to allow us to also help promote the programming that you are doing if funding is received. So a little bit about the radius of area beyond each of these sites, the 7 sites that they're going to be touring across the state of Florida. If you are not within the county that they are going to be touring, that is okay. You can be just within the proximity of it. If you are even in Miami, you have 3 different options of tour sites there to promote with your project, to say, hey, if you want to travel to any of these locations in South Florida, we highly encourage that as well. So not to worry, if you are watching this, if you're attending this webinar and you say, okay, well, I'm not in the county, that does not disqualify you. You just have to be in the state of Florida. So good news there. So the first grant I'm going to go over today is our main funding opportunity that we offer here at Florida Humanities every single year. And that is our Community Project Grants Program. So the Community Project Grants offer up to $5,000 in funding to support public humanities programming that is of interest and need to your local communities. So this is really just funding that you come to us and say, we want to do public humanities programming on this topic. This is how it relates to the humanities, and we can provide you with funding. This isn't a templated program in a way that you have to fit to very regimental guidelines. The genesis of this grants program is to really fund your community's needs, your organization's needs, to support your public humanities programming. So of course, there are guidelines on our website, which I'll be sending out. So there are rules that you have to follow, like with any grant program. And I will go over some of the main ones today. So of course, the project has to be rooted in the humanities and considered public humanities programming. It also has to involve humanities scholars, engage the general public, and be free, or at least not cost prohibitive. So first off, I really wanted to go over what is public humanities programming. So the difference is that this programming really actively engages with the public in the humanities and fosters constructive dialogues grounded in Florida history, heritage, and culture. And this is a very important distinction because we do not fund research projects per se, but we would fund the active engagement with your general public, with the audience on the research that has been collected. So for example, oral history projects, that is something we see come through our system quite often. We would not necessarily fund the sole collection of those oral histories, because what we are interested in is how are you engaging your communities and the stories and themes that come out of those histories, that come out of those personal stories, that bring about that light bulb and generate that constructive dialogue with people to have them shift their perspectives or just see someone else's perspective. So that is the difference between public humanities programming and projects that may be rooted in the humanities. Now, another qualification of community project grants is that your projects have to involve humanities scholars. Now, this question we receive quite often, right? Who qualifies as a humanities scholar? As we saw, the humanities disciplines can be so broad, and why is it important to involve them? Well, we describe humanities scholars as an individual with a high level of experience in a humanities discipline or is actively engaged in research or programming in that field, such as professors. So for example, if you are doing a project on the history of a certain culture, you would want to involve a humanities scholar, perhaps a professor of history that specializes in that cultural history, that maybe teaches a course on it or has written a book on it, someone who is very qualified in that topic or area. Now, in your project, you could also involve community experts, subject area experts, perhaps someone who is, has just local knowledge or personal experience with that topic. And that is also great. We love to see that. The more scholars, community experts, the better in the project, because it showcases that it is truly a community-led and community-involved initiative. But we do require that there is an individual who has a great level of experience academically, professionally, with their background in the field. So for example, if you are also doing an oral history project, we do require that you bring on a professional or a qualified oral historian, someone who knows best practices, and that can really root their questions in proven initiatives. So here are some examples of the projects we support through community project grants. These are some of the most popular ones that have come up, especially over the 2020. We've seen a lot of programs move to the virtual realm. Previously, 2019 and back, we had a lot of in-person programming, and things that were virtual, like I'm sure many of your organizations were not given a high priority. And I'm happy to say we can fund public humanities programming that is entirely virtual. If you wanted to put on together podcasts or give a virtual lecture series, we can fund those as well. Or if you wanted to do a hybrid model and maybe have 2 in-person lectures and 5 virtual programs, that would be great as well. So here are just 5 examples of some projects we fund through community project grants. One, like I said, lecture series or podcasts. We fund a lot of podcasts and lecture series. What's important to us is to see who are the scholars that you are going to bring on to talk about their topics. What exactly is the theme of their presentation? How is it rooted in the humanities? Another one is exhibits with complementary public humanities programming. We see a lot of great exhibits come through, ones that are so impactful that leave you with goosebumps. What we are interested in with those exhibits is how are you engaging the public in the themes brought forth in the exhibit. An example of this is we funded the exhibit Legacy of Lynching in Duval County at the Museum of Science and History up in Jacksonville. And so we supported a bit of the exhibit, but most of our funding of $5,000 went to put on complementary programming that brought in scholars, that brought in lecturers, that brought in experts of the civil rights movement to talk about those themes with the public. Another one is oral histories with complementary public humanities programming. We fund a lot of those quite often. And like I said, again, we do require that there is perhaps a forum, a panel discussion at the end that present these histories with the oral historian and inspire a conversation with the general public about what themes were brought forth. Another one is community conversations. This is very relevant now when people more than ever need to come together to hear another person's perspectives, to get perhaps inspired by a community's goals or roots. And so we fund a lot of those opportunities where you're having a humanities scholar kind of giving the contextual overview of perhaps a community issue, and then smaller round groups happen where people can converse and talk about those issues, and then the broader, the general public comes together and talks about it all together. And then of course, we also love funding bold new programming that does not fit into something that we've seen before, but that is rooted in humanities and involves the general public. So here are just a few examples of community project grants that we funded in the past. And I have pulled out a few that relate specifically to environmental humanities, since that is the theme of today. So the first one is a grant that we awarded to the city of Tarpon Springs. And their project was called the Greek Community of Tarpon Springs Documentary. What they did is they created a documentary about the Greek community and their passion, how they united through dance, their culture, their history with the sponge diving industry. And so what they requested funding from Florida Humanities for was a panel discussion and the film screening that brought these stories of the film to the general public. And so we funded the honoraria for the scholars that participated in the panel, the promotion of this event, which I think I attended. This was my first one in 2019. And I think over 300 people attended this film screening. Film screenings continue to be very, very popular. So another example would be bringing in a film and showcasing it in a local community center about water or the environment of your region, and then bringing in perhaps professors of history, of anthropology, of cultural ecology to talk about what this means for your community and the future of the water of your region. So here are just some films from some clips from the film. And like I said, over 300 people attended, and it was just so well received of the community. They loved the opportunity to see their local elders and their local leaders kind of talk about their history. So another example of a community project grant is the Key West Botanical Garden Society. We awarded them $3,500 to host a speakers series. So this is an important note too. So while the grant offers up to $5,000, you can request less than that. If you only need $3,500 to complete your project, then that is what you ask for. You don't feel the need to try to figure out, how to request $5,000 for it. We've seen in funded projects as low as, I think, $1,000, $200 or $1,000 for your projects. So that is perfectly acceptable. So what the Key West Botanical Garden Society did is they brought in somebody who traveled from Cuba to Florida on what is called a Cuban chug. So it is when they put all of their belongings in a boat and travel across dangerous waters to try to seek freedom and seek sanctuary in the United States. So we funded this individual, who is also a humanities scholar, to tell his story. And really the theme and how this relates to water is water as a divider, but water as a uniter, and how it can be a dangerous experience, but also one that can bring about hope for the future of them and their families. For the third grant I just wanted to highlight, we're going to go to the Silver River Museum and talk about springs. So in this project, the Silver River Museum was awarded $4,000 to expand their virtual humanities content online at the Silver River Museum. So this is a project that came up through the pandemic, the COVID period, when in-person gatherings were just not possible. So what this applicant and this awardee did was they digitized, they created a great online resource, which is still ongoing, of the digital collections of their museum to make it more accessible to people who could not attend the museum in person. A benefit of that, of course, as we all know, is that your reach now greatly expands beyond the people who could attend in person. Now you're reaching folks from across Florida, on the other side of Florida, across the nation, internationally. So we love seeing projects like this, that you're really working to expand your reach beyond your local community. So this, the Silver River Museum, not only created this virtual exhibit, which, like we've seen and I've said before, is a more passive environmental focused project. They brought in scholars to talk about the history and held virtual programming that actively engaged the public. And that was the key for us, to, of course, support this great digital humanities collection on their website, but to see how they were engaging the public in these humanities themes that they were presenting. So a few of the common barriers to funding with community project grants. I just wanted to touch briefly on this so you can keep aware of them. One is we do not fund art or performing art projects. What we fund is public humanities programming. And I know this can be tricky because In one way, art is a very human-tied element, right? Humans create art, so how is that not part of the humanities? We see that as a more visual art project. And what we would be interested in funding is the analysis, the interpretation, the discourse that happens grounded in history, heritage, and culture tied to that art. So for example, if you were going to have an art exhibit, perhaps a painter of your local landscapes or water quality, we would be able to fund humanities scholars coming in to talk about the themes that arise through that art, maybe grounding it a little bit in the history of the region, different cultures that are represented in the art. So that's an example of a marriage between humanities and the arts that we will be able to fund that humanities side of it. Another barrier to funding, like I talked about in the beginning of this presentation, is environmental science. So we do not fund the sciences or projects that solely focus on science without a strong humanities tied to it. And then if you are unsure about either of those two barriers to funding, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to give you kind of more of an explanation or overview or guide you in more of a direction that's grounding your project in the humanities. And then of course, the third barrier to funding is projects without all the details. This is very important because maybe, okay, your project is rooted in the humanities. It does have an environmental humanities focus to it, but you're just not quite there with who are the speakers you're going to bring on or what their topics are. We see projects come through quite often that say you're wanting to support a lecture series and you're going to have 10 lectures, but you haven't solidified who the speakers are or what they're actually going to talk about. And while that could eventually be a fundable project, it's not fundable at that moment because in order for us to release those funds and to say it's fundable, we have to know what the speakers are going to be even talking about to ensure that it's rooted in the humanities and to know who the speakers are to ensure that they are qualified to talk about their topic. So a lot of folks want to know, what are my chances of being funded if I apply for this grant? And we know that grants applications can take a lot of time, and especially coming out of the pandemic, our resources are limited and we're doing a lot. Right now, the funding ratio for community project grants hover around 30%. So that is, if you apply for a grant, you have a 30% chance of being funded. Now, I will say the tip for you is to reach out to me. Those who work with their grantors in advance of submitting their grant, and not only asking if your project is eligible, but requesting if I could review a sample narrative or the sample narratives altogether in a sample budget, to have a Zoom call to talk about your proposed programming so that I can offer guidance and feedback to make it more competitive. The folks who reach out to grantors well in advance of the submission and have those conversations are so much more likely to be in that 30% and to get funded. And we love talking to our applicants because us working with you in advance of the submission means more funded grants and more great humanities programming that we're able to get out there. So we really, really want to work with you to make sure your project is as competitive as it can be. So when can you apply? So the remaining deadlines for 2021, we have two of them. The one that's most upcoming is in July 21st at noon. All of our deadlines are at noon. So make sure you keep that mental note and a little calendar item on your calendar. And if you apply for the July 21st deadline, community project grants are 1-year grants. So if you apply July 21st, you will be notified September 1 if you are awarded or denied. And if you are awarded, you have 1 year to complete your projects. That important note in there about public programs can start, that we do require that for any of your public events, for example, your first lecture that you're going to give can't begin until 6 weeks after the award date. So if you're going to apply in July, that would fund any of your public programs that start October 13th and beyond through September 1st, 2022. So just you'll have to have a little foresight to see, what your programs, when they're going to be, when you hope to, hold them, so you can plan which deadline you need to apply for. So the next grant we are going to go over is Florida Talks. This is our more templated, very streamlined funding opportunity that gives applicants up to $1,000 to host either 1, 2, or 3 virtual or in-person programs selected right from our speakers directory. We made this as easy as possible for you to just select speakers that we have already pre-approved, we've set up, we know what they're talking about, and all you have to do is say, I'd like to bring these speakers in. They have agreed to come and speak at my organization, and then we award you the funding. You also, as an awardee of Florida Talks, receive templated marketing materials and templated evaluation tools. So whereas community project grants offers more funding to support a variety of public humanities programming that you want to do, that's really the bigger projects you have in mind, where you already have those promotional ideas and those brand visions. Maybe you're working with a lot of different organizations. Florida Talks is our very templated program to make it so easy for you to bring in great speakers that can speak on a variety of topics. So let's take a closer look at the speakers directory, because with this opportunity, you are limited to the speakers on this directory. You can only choose the speakers that we supply here, and you can't choose speakers outside of it. So if you want to host a community project grant and bring in 10 speakers that are not on the speakers directory, community project grants is the direction you want to go. But we have 53 speakers in this directory and over 100 different topics. So not for a moment are you limited to what you can choose. There is so much on here, and they really are terrific programs. These are tried and true, given the Florida Humanities stamp of approval speakers. So as you can see here, there's a lot of different topics that we've grouped them into. There's tourism, there's civil rights, storytelling, and architecture and beyond. What we're going to look at today is the topic of environmental speakers. So currently we have 5 in here right now that have topics that relate to the environment in Florida. So if you are a library, maybe a museum, a historical society that just want to host 1, 2, or 3 of these speakers to talk about the topics that they offer, this is the route you want to go. So we're going to look at one of them here, Victoria. So if you click on, if you're in the speakers directory, and I'll provide a link after this webinar is over. So if you click on Victoria, what's going to come up is her bio and the programs that she has available. So you can see here that she speaks on sacred waters, exploring the protection of Florida's fluid landscapes. It has her contact number and her email, and it notes that she has agreed to give this program either in person or virtually. This is important to note because, of course, as we all know, we're respectful of people's feelings of safety or if they have different health concerns. So some speakers on here may have only agreed to give their presentations virtually. So just be sure to look at that. And one note on the speakers while I'm here, I'd like to draw your attention to Steve Knoll, who some of you may know. He has already agreed to work with all of the 7 Museum on Main Street host sites. So he's already in the works to give some engaging presentations with those organizations. So if you are, of course, an outside cultural organization that's interested in bringing him on, that is fine. Just note that he's already involved in the project with those organizations too. So on the environment through our Florida Talks programs, like you saw, we have 5 speakers, and between them, they can present on 13 different programs that they have. So there really are a good number of opportunities here. If you are so interested, you could have 1 or 2 of these speakers talk about the environment and then have another one come in that talks about something else unrelated to the environment. That is totally fine too. And just to give you one example of the Florida Talks funding opportunity, this is Wwf Public Media. They were awarded a $1,000 grant to bring in 3 different speakers. So how the funding worked here is they were awarded $1,000. They used $900 for speaker fees and $100 for promotion. And this is important to note because each of these speakers, all of the speakers on our speakers directory have agreed to charge no more than $300 for their honoraria. They could charge more for travel and per diem if they're, living in Pensacola and you're having them to come down to Key West in person. Keep that in mind. There may be some travel costs associated with that you'll need to cover through the grant or through cost share. But for honoraria, all of them have agreed to charge no more than $300. And we did this to ensure that these great programs and these great speakers are accessible to all organizations across Florida, no matter what your financial status is. If you are a multi-million organization or a organization with a $10,000 budget, we wanted to make sure that these programs are accessible to you. And if you're wondering, okay, well, I see your speakers, but I could just, contract with them off of the Florida Talks program. Why go through the work? Well, the good news is that we will advocate for your programs and put them on our website and event listing forms, put them on our social media, and spread them to our constituent base of over 10,000 people. So you have the opportunity to apply for $1,000, a very good chance of getting $1,000 for the Florida Talks program, and allow us to promote your speaking engagements. That increases your reach and allows it to be more accessible. So here are some examples of some Facebook posts of the Florida Talks program. And of course, our applicant, WWF, they have their public media station, so they could write an article about it. But that's all to say, if you're not a public media station, highly encourage you to reach out to them to let them know of your great programs you have in case they're able to write a story. So Florida Talks, the difference between that and community project grants, there's a 95% chance of your project getting funded. That is a less competitive funding opportunity. So if you, like I said, if you're interested in funding for 3 speakers, you have a very good chance of receiving those funds. Of course, you have to follow the guidelines, work with the program coordinator, Lisa Lennox, but we highly encourage organizations to go this route if they're interested in this, in 3 speakers. And the deadline is June 25th. So to fund programs that occur between September 1 and December 31st of this year, so fall 2021, you will want to aim to apply for the June 25th deadline. So we will be letting folks know we have been broadcasting this opportunity and do attend the online webinars that we have available. I think we will have them pre-recorded. The last one for Florida Talks is tomorrow, Friday, May 28th. If you're attending this webinar live, do register for that if you're attending this or interested in this Florida Talks opportunity. So looking back at all the different tour sites across Florida, maybe now hearing the different 2 funding opportunities that I went over, you can maybe see how you could work on a project that situates to one of those. So we really, really do encourage you to reach out and to apply for an environmental humanities project and to receive funding if it's eligible. So the steps to apply. One thing that we really want to stress, like I said with the community project grants section, is to reach out to us. I am the grants director, so I manage our community project grants program. Lisa Lennox is my colleague who runs our Florida Talks funding opportunity, and we are here to help you. We are more than able to get on the phone with you, get on Zoom, and just walk you through the program and let you know if your opportunity is eligible. So first, you're going to brainstorm your project. That's always the first step before you reach out. Just think about what you want to do, and then contact Florida Humanities to see if your project fits. See sample applications, seek a pre-review, ask if there is a webinar coming up or if there is one on demand or recorded you can watch. And then you're going to apply for funding and make sure you apply before the noon deadline. And if you are denied, then what? Well, don't worry. Funding can be competitive and don't be discouraged. Reach out to me for community project grants or Lisa for Florida Talks and seek comments. And then please apply again if you're encouraged to do so. People have been denied, and I've seen time and time again that they request evaluator comments and they say, wow, that's so helpful. I didn't see that or hear that before. Maybe they didn't reach out to me prior and that's their first time, receiving feedback from us. And then they apply again and they're funded. So we see, hear successful and see successful stories like that all the time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my camera again, and I'm going to open it up to question and answers. I'm opening up the chat window right now, and I'm happy to offer anything that you guys have. So I also wanted to say too, while maybe you're thinking about your questions, is how much funding do you get up front for both of these funding opportunities? With community project grants, you get 90% of your award up front after you sign the contract, and we ensure your organization is registered in sam.gov. What is sam.gov? That is the federal government's assurance that your organization is in good standing to receive these federal funds. Because while we are a state nonprofit, these funds that we get come from the federal government. So we do ensure your organization is registered in sam.gov. We can talk about that offline if you have any questions. And then for Florida Talks, you receive 100% of the funding up front. So with that, I know we're 45 minutes in, and I hope that this webinar was very informational for you. If you have any questions about environmental humanities, what we fund, more than happy to chat with you offline. And I do encourage you also, if you're interested in community project grants or Florida Talks, to attend the webinars on either one of those. Like I said, Florida Talks has a webinar tomorrow, Friday, May 28th. And then the community project grants, the next webinar is June 18th, also a Friday at 10 a.m. And there are webinars on our website that are pre-recorded, so you just watch it at any time as well if you're not interested in attending a live one. Well, seeing no questions come through, I think I will let you all go, and feel free to chat with me offline if that is interesting for you as well. All right. Well, thank you all so much for attending today, and hope you have a good rest of your day.